My name is Milane. I am a 13 years old who has had but one experience with the paranormal so far throughout my life. I was 6 years old, and it was a normal November night for me. I was in bed by 8 o'clock sharp, as every night, but I usually stayed up an hour later. I was looking out my window as I had done at that time to get to sleep. I had always been scared of the dark, and I would be sure to cover my whole body up and only leave a small slit open so I could breathe. But on this night, I had been feeling brave and decided to take the covers off my head. Well, as I was looking out my window, I had felt a creepy feeling come over me and instinctively threw the covers over my head. After the feeling passed, I took the covers back off and my eyes went straight to the window. There, in that window, were two huge, blood-red eyes staring at me. I couldn't move. It was as if I was frozen with fear. And then, they were gone. I regained enough of myself to throw the covers on my head and stay up half the night scared to death. Then about 4 years later, I was in my kitchen, thinking about what had happened. My babysitter was watching me, and I asked her if she had had any unusual experiences, and she broke down crying, saying that she didn't want the man in the window to come back. I asked her which window, and it was the same window where I saw those eyes. I served in the United States Army in the infantry with the 101st Airborne. While I was in active duty, I was deployed to Iraq in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. My unit spent most of our time in Mosul, Iraq, in the northern part of the country. Mosul is a very old city. There are sections where you would find holes in the street, and if you looked down into them, you could see where city had been built upon older cities. During the time of this occurrence, June 2003, we had just dealt with a riot by the local Iraqi people who were upset at the corrupt local police. So to help rectify the problem, we fired or arrested the majority of the police. This meant to keep the police stations in the city secure, we had to then provide security and 24-hour guard on them. My squad had been tasked with a 12-hour nighttime rotation at a certain police station. The station was a 3-story building in a very cramped and tightly condensed area of the city. The street in front of the station was only about a car and half wide. And directly across the street was a mosque with at least 10-foot walls. There were roads on either side of the mosque intersecting into the road in front of the station. Myself and 2 other guys from my squad were sitting on the balcony of the 2nd floor of the station pulling security on our shift. It was sometime in the night. If I had to guess, I would say it was sometime around 2:30 a.m. While on guard, we would use the lights on our rifles to illuminate any car that drove by so we could see if there were any sort of weapons in the vehicle and stuff like that. We heard a car driving towards us from one of the side road on the mosque, so we got ready with our lights to illuminate the car when it came into view. Once we saw the car, we shined our lights into the vehicle, directing the light towards the driver. The drive had a typical reaction to the surefire light, which is blindingly intense, by squinting his eyes and attempting to look away from the light. The passenger had a much different reaction. His eyes seemed to glow with intensity by the light. He stared right back at the light, almost looking through it. And at us. It was very eerie. At the time, the best we could describe his eyes were that of a cat in the dark with a flashlight shined in its face. I have never heard of a person's eyes being able to reflect light like that before. Or anything you could purchase to do such things, especially in a second or third world country. Well, after I got back to the United States, the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose came out. So my then girlfriend, now wife, and I went to see the movie. I now describe the man's eyes as looking exactly like Emily's did in the barn when she named off all the demons which possessed her. I am completely convinced what I saw that night in Iraq was demonic or an individual who was possessed. I live in the rural town of Port Hedland, Western Australia, and this is what happened on my walk. It was 2 Saturdays ago, on the 12th of August. I was walking alone at about 5:30 in the afternoon. I would normally have been walking my dog Charlie at this time, but she'd had an eye infection that kept her from sleeping and didn't seem up to the exercise. Port Hedland is a coastal town near the northern end of Australia and is prone to heavy rain from cyclones. The annual torrents require an extensive system of ditches running through the town to drain water off the roads. There also tends to be a lot of empty land between blocks of houses, massively overgrown with weeds that are only occasionally burned or trimmed away by the council. I was walking along a narrow concrete bridge when I heard heavy breathing from the ditch below me. First, I thought it was a drunk. Then I remembered the time I was jogging through a park, with my dog this time, and realized that I was running straight towards a large feral-looking mongrel dog, who was poking out of the yellow scrub and baring more and more teeth as I approached. We forget how close we are to nature. I hurried along the bridge and looked under it after retreating to a respectful distance. There was nothing there. More relaxed and curious now, I walked back onto the bridge to ponder the origin of the sound. It promptly resumed. This time I boldly leaned over the railing and looked right under the bridge. Again, I saw nothing more suspicious than empty faded beer cans. I straightened up, and stinking hot breath blew in my ear. It was fear that I felt. Pure fear. Using some fancier word could only cheapen the experience. I fell back, facing the source of the breath. There was nothing I could see. But the heavy panting continued, and I was well familiar with that rotten flesh smell unique to the breath of a dog on a bloody diet. Before I'd even realized I should be getting up, there was sudden invisible pressure on my chest. I expected paws, but did not quite feel them. Even now I can't quite discern the shape of the force that held me, whether I was restrained by paws, claws, hands, or a flat slate. Vicious howling erupted in front of me. Thoughts of the dog filled my mind, until I couldn't even see where I really was. That killer mongrel peeking his nose out of the bush, coolly deciding how close he would allow me to come before he lunged. Unable to think straight, I imagined that this was what was supposed to have happened, that I had fluked my way out of some cosmic debt and now the collector was knocking. Then it was gone. I didn't move for some time. I wanted to go back there. It took me 4 days to get the nerve to actually do it. But I knew I wanted to go back. I thought about it for a while and decided everything needed to be the same. I arrived at the bridge at 5:30 the next Wednesday, walked to the center, and waited. After minutes of nothing, I realized what had drawn the thing to me. I began to picture the dog once more, remembered the lip pulling back and the stain points behind. As nothing continued to happen, I realized what was different from the first time. The memory no longer scared me. I've thought about this and realized a few things. The first time I crossed the bridge, something, not a ghost in usual terms, I have no reason to believe it was ever human, created the breathing sound that I was free to ignore or interpret however I wished. It was only after I returned that the breath resembled the dog's. I think the thing offered me a chance to show it what I feared, and I did. I can think of 2 reasons why it acted as it did. Perhaps it wanted to help me exorcise my demons, so to speak, or in some way it wanted my fear for its own reasons. We forget how close we are to nature, but maybe some part of nature needs us a little closer.